So look, let me start with this question. Is there a moral imperative about Bitcoin, or is it just a neutral technology? What do you guys think?
All right, I'll start. So for me, there's definitely a moral imperative. And it starts with the immorality of the current system. Fiat money is highly immoral. It is a cesspool of theft, corruption, and cronyism. It needs to end because it is horribly unjust. And when we're talking about the battle between good and evil, that's the context that we have to think about it in. Because the current system is evil. It's straight up evil. And until we acknowledge that, it's hard to sort of like argue for Bitcoin at sort of a purely technical level. No, a lot of people, when they first look at this space, they see it purely through a technical lens. They think of things as, all right, well, you know, it's like a better mousetrap or something like that. The more you study this stuff, the more you come to realize it's not like that at all. It is a moral imperative because the current system is evil. It is set up to benefit the few at the expense of everyone else.
Can we get any opposing opinions?
No, not opposing, but adding upon. Our great philosopher, Andrew Tate, who was once an atheist and is now a Muslim, was talking about the fact that his transition from atheism to Islam involved the past few years feeling like he personally witnessed actual evil, a force of pure evil, and that for him the existence of a force of pure evil showed that there must be an opposing force as well. And so my caveat on what Jimmy said is that for me, this would be actually just like almost a closing statement at the beginning, is that to me, Bitcoin represents a Schelling point for a perspective on humanity. And I totally agree that Bitcoin is the Schelling point, as Balaji said, with all of the recent things, that the Bitcoin maximalists are the group most prepared for what could happen and what would come after what happens. But that fundamentally, to me, what this conference has led me to feel is that the true value is in us as a group of humans with shared values who have coalesced around Bitcoin, and that regardless of what happens with the Bitcoin project, we will just keep going in the same direction regardless. Yup.
I would say that to me, Bitcoin, and that what is the most attractive to me, and I think also like a leading star for my life as well, is about truth. And Bitcoin exposes so much falsities and just sheer deception in the current system. And it's like this shining light of truth, basically. So to me, that is truth is obviously a good thing. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm being very cautious how to feel like morally or in my heart about Bitcoin. I do know that group identity is definitely evil, and we have to be very cautious, or I have to be very cautious not to ascribe absolute good or evil label to anything like fiat or Bitcoin. It's easy to see in the moment that the problems of the fiat system, because it's so big and has been around so like long enough to be completely corrupted maybe, and Bitcoin is new, and also thanks to the crypto system, which soaked up all the seemingly like more evil interests, Bitcoin seems to be quite pure. But I think like caution is always called for, and if you give up and say, okay, Bitcoiners good, non-coiners evil, that's when you become like completely evil 100%. So complicated.
Jeremy, do you have any thoughts on this whole question?
Sure, just to summarize, fiat system is unfair and unjust. and we're all working toward a more just system with Bitcoin.
So yeah, I guess for me, I think I probably do agree there's a moral imperative about Bitcoin, but I understand there is an alternative view out there. There are people out there, people like, as an example, Sergey from Bitrefill, right? A lot of people have used Bitrefill, the vouchers. He kind of has this view of like, look, there's Bitcoin, kind of the community, but if he were to analogize, there are lots of people who use BitTorrent just neutrally, and they wouldn't necessarily go to a BitTorrent conference, and they wouldn't be trying to, agitate to get a lot of people to use BitTorrent. And maybe you could even argue, there was something wrong about Napster and RIA and MPAA and all this other stuff. So there are people who view it like, it's just this neutral technology. There's no moral good or evil. You just use Bitcoin if it helps you, right? I guess that would be I'm trying to steel man, right? This is not my personal view. But what would you guys say to that?
I just say that you're shortly on BitTorrent. It was actually a good technology as well. So that's all on that one.
So you would ascribe a moral imperative to BitTorrent as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess that's you're consistent. So yeah, that's good. So okay, here's another idea. Does that mean if there's a moral imperative around using Bitcoin, does that mean you should shame people who still use fiat? Right? Is there some imperative there, or is there an imperative to not hold government bonds? Right? And I think I've seen some Bitcoiners and some libertarians who actually do make that case. They say you should not hold government bonds. You should hold Bitcoin. Because of you're funding that system.
Bitcoin started, I feel like, my interest in Bitcoin, I should say, began during the Occupy Wall Street protests. And I was heavily involved in Occupy LA. And I was going around and realizing that a lot of these people were never going to figure out the scam of fiat. And at that time, I didn't know what the answer would be, because I felt like the bankers would just keep running circles around these people forever. So when I discovered Bitcoin, I thought, this could actually solve these problems. I lost my train of thought, so somebody take it away.
No, I don't think you should shame someone for using fiat.
Thank you.
I think there's an
forgot.
education process. I think there's an exploration process. There's a learning process. Like that's important. It's not about you shouldn't be attacking the human or shaming the human. You need to show the different systems. And Bitcoin, frankly, needs to be a better system to win. And so that's what we need to bring into place as builders.
Can I disagree here? Because I do think that you need to shame some people. And the reason is because there's a lot of money printing happening, and we are all culpable. So I make this analogy a lot. When you get a mortgage from your bank, right, whatever bank it is, say you get $500,000, it could be like 5% interest rate or something like that. That does not come from somebody's savings. That money is printed for your benefit. Now, we may say, well, why don't we take advantage of the system as it is? Well, because you're stealing from everybody else. However much you're getting, right? The bank benefits because you're paying them interest. You're benefiting because you get access to money way earlier. But the fact of the matter is there's somebody that you're hurting, and that is everybody else that holds the dollar. And this is a lot of people around the world. I'm sure many of you in this room know the power of the dollar. Your own currency is going to be weaker against the dollar, and for a lot of people in the developing world, that's their stable currency. So when you take out a mortgage and dilute all of the people that have that money, you are stealing. That's it. There's no bones about it. And it's not just individuals that are stealing, it's companies that are stealing, it's governments that are stealing. Theft is theft. If I went and took a bunch of stuff from your house, I mean, you would say that's evil, right? You would shame people for doing that, for burglary. We're doing that at a very base level, but we're not privy to the reality of it. And the fact of the matter is, the people that hold the dollar, I mean, these are some of the poorest and most vulnerable people in the world. The most used currency, the most desirable currency in North Korean black markets is the US dollar. Think about it. You're stealing from those people every time you take out loans. Now, I'm not saying you should shame people for using cash or something like that. No, but we do need to recognize the reality that when there are loans created out of nothing for your benefit, that you are stealing from other people. And I have no bones about saying that and saying you're stealing. And when people see the system as it is, they're much more likely to support Bitcoin and something that's a lot more fair. And I think that's a good thing, because a lot of people just aren't aware of the injustice of money printing.
I'd summarize Caesar's unto Caesar, fiat unto governments, Bitcoin unto people.
I would say that the danger to me in shaming people is I just see the Greta Thunberg meme of how dare you, and I think it's dangerously hubristic for us to be like, no, we have the one true perspective, because it seems to me that even when your ideology is poor, you can see that pure. You can see this throughout the region of Asia in the 20th century, where a bunch of people with pure ideologies, I'll make it safe and stick with Pol Pot, wanted to tear down the system and create a year zero so that it was equitable for everyone, because colonialism, and you can go on and on with that, it led to the killing fields. And I know that's an extremely dramatic example, but I share Andrew's perspective that because of that, it requires some amount of caution. Be careful when you battle with demons, lest you become one. So even if we start with the best money and the purest intentions, I feel like some amount of humility is useful for us as individuals and, dare I say, souls.
So I'm curious then, in your view, would you then put it in a more neutral light and you would say, well, hey, I'm just going to use Bitcoin and you just use whatever, and there's no moral...
If someone were to ask me and were actually showing interest beyond, is price number go up? I would absolutely say that to me, on the planet right now, the closest representation of philosophical truth, of how you can use praxis, to use a Marxist term, is Bitcoin. It's a demonstration of the beliefs that you have within you. But if something better were to come along, hey, there are big blockers in here right now, believe it or not, that think that the wrong side won. And I think it's similarly hubristic to be so certain that everyone on the big block side is so stupid that we just know that the right decision was made 100%, not even 0.0000001% doubt, and just stay open and know that what we're actually aiming toward is the good, the true, the beautiful, and hopefully for the rest of our lives and beyond, BTC represents that. But with that, Leonard Cohen has a quote, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in, right? Is to keep that crack and not assume that, we have it all. Yeah, okay, all right.
I think that's moral relativism at its worst. Of course you can say that evil things are evil, and calling it out is part of our job. It's like you could say, Vietnam, there were multiple perspectives. What Richard Nixon did with Watergate, there are multiple perspectives. What Pol Pot did, there are multiple perspectives. It's idiotic to say that evil is not evil, that we might not have the correct perspective, and that moral relativism is okay. Your truth might be different. No, I reject that sort of moral relativism. That is stupid. If it's evil, if it's theft, you need to call it out. And to say, we're just being super arrogant and that might lead to Nazism or something, that's a leap of insanely, of insane bounds. That does not follow in any way, shape, or form. To call evil is the right thing to do. That is true. And if you're going to be a moral relativist, why would you say anything at all? There are evil things that happen. I think everyone can notice that. If you steal something from somebody's backyard or something like that, that's evil. And that's what fiat money is doing. If you print more money, you are stealing. That's it. There's nothing else.
We should have started this at 8 o'clock this morning. That would have been amazing. No, so back to your point, Stephan, I think we have to be careful when we have words like shame and shame people. Those are very loaded terms in a lot of places. Not disagreeing with you, Jimmy, on evil is evil. But just, let's clarify those types of things. But let's move on.
So then what is the what's the appropriate?
Can I just say
okay, go on.
since that was very intense? I just want to say that Priya he just showed the meme, and even if we can talk more, we can agree to disagree after, just for discussion later. Greenpeace is very certain that Bitcoin is the evil, right? And I don't agree with that at all. I think ESG, woke, I can go on and on. Jeffrey Epstein, we can go as far as you want to go. It scares me to be as certain as they are. Their certainty gives me pause about being similarly certain, and no, how dare you, Greta?
Well, I think I'm probably kind of more with Jimmy's camp here in this. Being honest, I think it's kind of like, otherwise we're just constantly walking on eggshells. Like if we're never sure about anything, how do we ever achieve anything?
Yeah,
So,
and certainty, like conviction, does not mean that you're evil. Like, there are people that are very convicted in very wrong things, and they do a lot of evil. But the conviction does not make you evil. It's the evil thoughts that make you evil. It's thinking that the white Aryan race needs to conquer everything, or that socialism is inevitable and that communist workers' paradise needs to come into play. It is the belief that is evil. It is not the conviction that is evil. And that's a distinction that you need to make. And to say, oh, well, those people had conviction and they were evil and therefore they did evil things, these are separate issues. You can have a lot of conviction on things that are good. And there are a lot of people that have done a lot of great things because they were convicted in the good. If you think about people like Mother Teresa, they had a lot of conviction in what they were doing is good, and that poverty and poorness and the way these people were being treated was an evil thing. That conviction was a good thing. And to lump everyone that has conviction with evil is idiotic. I don't think that's true. I think these are separate issues, and you need to be certain about what it is that is good and evil to have to produce the things that you want to happen. And of course, evil people with conviction will produce a lot of evil, but it's not the conviction, it's the evil thoughts that they had.
I have many thoughts on that, but I don't want to necessarily. I'm happy to go, but I'm also happy to let it go.
all right, let's. Well, you know what? I think it's been an interesting aspect there, but let's try to move forward. I think everyone's had their chance to kind of say something there. But in terms of moving forward, right? Like the theme is the battle of good and evil, and where Bitcoin plays into that.
I have a different, just to
Okay,
follow up
yeah,
on this
go on,
one.
go on.
Not to drag on, but a different approach to looking at it. I mean, for the record, I agree with Jimmy on the fact that evil exists and so forth, but a personal approach would be the one of radical self-ownership. Actually, to the extent that you understand something, take ownership of it. If you understand that the loan has those consequences that Jimmy just mentioned, I mean, now it's up to you to decide, is that what you want to do or not? Like, I'm not saying that it's that easy in terms of loans and so forth. The deeper thought is to take complete ownership over everything you do.
And I think that's a good approach. I think probably most people in the panel would probably agree with that idea that we should take ownership, we should take accountability wherever we can, even if you are existing within an evil system, let's say, right? If we kind of agree that there's bad aspects about fiat and fractional reserve banking and so on, but then the question is, how do you if Bitcoin is if there is a battle of good and evil, if there is a moral imperative, how do you fight in that battle? How do you bring more people into Bitcoin when maybe there are a lot of people who just don't care, right? Even if we all care, what do you do about people who don't care? Do you just ignore them and just kind of focus the effort on, let's say that, call it 10, 20%? You focus on them? and disregard the 80%? What do you guys think?
I will take the side of that. That humble building. I feel like this week, this conference has been a real lived experience for me of Odell's stay humble, stack sats, right? That Jesus was a carpenter. This idea that from humble beginnings, huge things are built over time. And that as some people I know that are very smart say that one of the things that evil does is that it attempts to hijack your attention, right? Like we could spend look at the Greenpeace meme, they're coming for us, anti-nuclear, and that time can also be spent continuing to build. And it may not be as fast as we dream, but over time it builds up. I mean, I'm sure we all remember when Lightning, vaporware, and here we are at the Lightning conference. And had we sort of listened to the naysayers and the doubters and said, oh, we have to switch to Solana because it's so high performance, a new layer one, that's what we need, right? We wouldn't be here and we wouldn't have the foundation that we do.
Yeah, we absolutely, Stephan. We don't focus on whatever percentage of people, the minority. Like, it is better money for the world. That is the mission. Get on mission. We're trying to drive adoption for everyone. We're helping share that with everyone, and that's the point.
Right. So you win people over with good products, with good use cases. You don't, if you just tell people, okay, this is in exactly the same product, but it's made with the numbers inside that you'll never see are like less evil, then you sound like a crazy person. You might be right, but it's like nothing to them, and they don't want to think about that necessarily if nothing improves in their lives. But if product is better, and then like connected to that, my one worry is like, it seems like from a very high level of bird's eye view on Bitcoin and Lightning, all the killer use cases where like major improvements can happen, or at least like all the use cases that are fundamentally impossible with existing systems seem to be illegal or like anti-regulation, and I don't know what to think about that because like I'm not anti-government, anti-rule, anti-hierarchy in principle. I think there's lots of good to governments, like not world government, but governments in general, and hierarchies and all that. So I haven't personally arrived at a solution to this. Like it seems Bitcoin allows a lot of stuff, like all the impossible that Bitcoin brings, or a lot of it is anti that.
I would say that if you're concentrating on the people that don't want to be convinced, you're kind of wasting your time, right? Peter Schiff has known about Bitcoin since like 2011 or something like that. He's never going to get convinced because he's too sort of invested into his own beliefs, his own ego, his own business, and he has no interest. So like telling him that he's being stupid, it's not going to really do anything. Neither is doing that for Paul Krugman or the various other types of people that don't want to get into Bitcoin, or honestly a lot of altcoiners, right? The Vitalik Buterins of the world, the people that are already invested into their own stuff and want to see Bitcoin fail so they can win. The people that you can convince are the people that come to you, right? Like if you waste time on people that like just want to argue with you on Twitter, I don't think that's a very good use of your time. But we all have this, right? During a bull market, like you get a call from like a person that you haven't heard in 20 years, right? Like they're like, hey, heard about this Bitcoin thing, and I know you're into it. Can you tell me a little bit more? Those are the people that you can influence because they get an inkling that something is wrong, something is different, and maybe it is just sort of FOMO over Bitcoin price rises or whatever, and maybe they're getting in because they just want to get rich. But whatever reason they get interested in Bitcoin, I think it's your responsibility to tell them the whole story. Here's what it is, and here's why it's different, and here's how you need to think about it, and this is what I've learned over the many years that I've been in this thing. And in my experience, like, people just sort of like put your flag out there. Hey, I'm a Bitcoiner. I know this stuff, and they come to you, and then you explain to them when they're ready, right? When they're open to it. That tends to work much better than just sort of telling people that they're thieves and that they need to, go change everything. I mean, to some degree, like that's just not very good tactically. It works much better if you just sort of let them know you're a Bitcoiner and that you have certain views, and that if you're interested, just come and talk at some point. And they all come because we know Bitcoin adoption is inevitable. It's the hardest money, and it will always win over the softer stuff. So, that I think is probably the best tactic that I've found.
I would like to pick up on just one thing that you mentioned there in terms of focus on the product instead of the details and what goes into it. I mean, I guess from a marketing side, I guess, yes, so, but from a builder side, and this is where I'm coming from, it's very important that those details, that those principles, and I would say that this is the reason why Bitcoin exists. It is the principles on which it's built, and keeping them pure, or keeping them, let's say a better word, keeping them good, keeping them good. It's very important, those details, what goes into what we build, it's very important.
And that reminds me of, as I'm sure many of you are familiar, there's this concept known as the eternal September, right? Like this idea, and I guess just quick explanation for those of you who might not know, I'm assuming most of you guys know, but this concept was, there used to be these like Usenet forums and things like this, and there used to be a new wave coming in each time, and there would be enough older people or well-experienced people to kind of enforce the culture. But then what happened, I think it was like a particular September, AOL switched, opened the floodgates, and all these new people came in, and there weren't enough kind of old folk or older experienced people to kind of enforce the culture. And then from their point of view, it was an eternal September. So I'm curious, if we're talking about good and evil and, the kind of eroding or watering down the Bitcoin ethos, how does Bitcoin deal with this eternal September?
Well, I think
More Jimmys.
I think to set the stage, I mean, we could be at the beginning, if Balaji's thesis, which I certainly believe in, is even 5 to 20% true, and there's a global financial bank insolvency crisis underway as we speak, then the value proposition of Bitcoin is going to start making sense to a lot more people. And I agree with Jimmy that all you can do is put the case out there, and you can lead a horse to water and you can't make them drink. And I think a lot of the people, I mean, Dominic said it when he was speaking, that a lot of us have finished with the 101 of wallets, and we can trust that there are YouTubers out there to fill in that role for people, and to just keep making the moral, philosophical case for why we actually believe in this, not as a get-rich-quick or even get-rich-slow scheme, but because we think you can build a civilization on top of this, and that those who can hear the message will take it.
I think the attempt at watering down is happening and has been happening since almost the beginning, because if you remember, Bitcoin has a mainnet, but it also has a testnet. By now it has several testnets. And in the beginning, people were trying to buy and hoard testnet coins. And actually the project had to take special measures to discourage that. But then Ethereum appeared and other forks. And I love altcoins and shitcoins because, like, from a technology standpoint, they're all testnets. It's just people trade them as if they're real coins. But fundamentally, they're all trying to water down because they're all like, we're better Bitcoin. And it's great training grounds for us, and we're trying to keep it pure.
They had to reset it 2 times, the test nets, just to reset it, stop that trading.
Yeah.
So we can get the coins actually usable again for actual testing.
Yeah, I would agree. Eternal September started in like 2017. Eternal September, the idea was every new class of college students would come in every September, and then you get a whole bunch of newbies or whatever. And we had that in 2011, 2013, 2017 was Eternal September. There was a continuous class of new people coming in. And at least in my view, that's been the case since then, and it hasn't stopped. There's always new people coming in, hearing about some altcoin and saying, oh, I know crypto because I got into Solana 2 years ago or something like that. And they think that they're all in the know or whatever. This is why we have the altcoin community. This is why we have, all these basically bought communities of different influencers on different altcoins. I think we've been fighting the good fight, right? Like showing them for what they are. They're fiat 2.0. They are just doing the same thing that fiat money has been doing. And it's up to us, it's up to people like us to show them, when they finally fall on their face and realize, okay, yeah, this thing's gone down 95% and it's not recovering, right? When you have enough of a cycle where they can recognize the truth, to show them, you know what? You've gone down the altcoin rabbit hole and you realize that it leads nowhere and that your pockets are empty and that you've been scammed. Come back, right? Like this is the real thing. And I've seen a lot of people go through this journey. Almost everyone goes through the same exact journey, right? Like you learn about Bitcoin, and then almost always like people think, oh, you know what? I want to be the money printer, so I'm gonna go get into mining. It's gonna be so easy. And then they realize it's like a very difficult business, low margin, and it's hard to get the equipment and whatever. And then they think, all right, how else can I rent seek? Let's go into altcoins, because that's good. I can get it early there because I'm too late to Bitcoin. And then they get into that, and then they lose all their money or whatever. And then finally, if after all of that they're not still completely jaded, then they come back to Bitcoin. And then you can tell them, oh, okay, like this is the real thing. And this is why Bitcoin has outlasted all of these other things, and then this other crap needs constant marketing to do anything. So it's that journey that we need to be somewhat empathetic to, and to sort of lead people out of and say, you know what, this is the real thing. And what you've been engaging in, you've been trying to get something for nothing. You've been trying to just get a lot of money for doing no work, which is what everybody in a fiat economy wants to do. This is what I call rent seeking. Instead, you need to actually work and do stuff that adds value. And this is the natural order of things. This is how civilization gets built. And that is the ethic that you need to have to really get into Bitcoin. Instead of trying to sort of scam your way into more money, go provide value to other people. Do what you are really good at, whatever skills, what you might have, go provide value to other people, use that money to go buy Bitcoin. Now you have a savings vehicle, and it's not going to be debased away from you. And that is the ultimate message that people need to hear. And I think that's the direction that we need to go, and this is the cure to the Eternal September.
Stephan, part of your question, I think, was around like culture and just sort of some of those traditions and so forth. And I think just generally, Bitcoin is unique in part because it has original source material from Satoshi. And thankfully he disappeared. We can debate that if we want to maybe sometime, but the point is there is material there to always point people to. And so whether it's the white paper, whether it's quotes, whether it's his other writings, I think there's just some really rich material there that is unique to Bitcoin. And so whether that's we put quotes on the app or whatever, like those are just fun things to do, to keep pointing people back to, hey, this is Satoshi, this is things that were written, these are principles that we should apply to, so, yeah.
But you know what that reminds, I mean, I kind of agree with you, but that also reminds me of what happened in 2017. There was a lot of white paperism and people saying, Satoshi's vision, right? Or even for you guys, they're Americans, right? There's the debate in the Constitution, the originalists and as in the people, the literal interpretation and then the sort of spirit of what it meant, right? So we could have those debates all day about what Satoshi said, what Hal Finney said,
There's a very easy way to resolve that, actually. You just need to go further back to the cypherpunks. There was the soil that brought Bitcoin. And you understand where Satoshi was coming from when you understand what the cypherpunks were about. I mean, Bitcoin was not coming out of nowhere. There was a rich history. people have been trying to create something like Bitcoin for like 20 years before. The technology was not ready. They tried different things. They didn't work out. It was the genius of Satoshi to put all those pieces together and to come up with a couple of new ones to make it actually work. And you go through that history of the cypherpunks, which is actually where I'm coming from in terms of I was not part of it, but that was where my information was coming
Ideology,
from. Yeah, coming to Bitcoin from that background, right? And then it makes total sense completely what meaning of cash is, for example. It's a bare asset, that's all there is. And then you solve all of those kind of things that were like from the OGs of Bitcoin in the early days. But I mean, you need to go further back than that, and then it becomes very clear actually where it's coming from. And that Bitcoin was created as a political product as well. That's also quite clear from the very start.
Even that's an interesting question. I think certainly looking at the cypherpunk history is an important aspect of it, even for Bitcoin for Everybody, a free course I did for Sailor Academy. I included a little bit of that cypherpunk history so people get a little bit of an awareness of that history. But even there are debates there. There are cypherpunks who disagreed with each other. There was the different camps, if you will. There was like the high tech, was it extropians, and then there were other types, and there were different attempts, right? There was like Nick Zaber's version. There was Wade Dye's, B Money. There was all these different attempts, and so and you know what else? There are people like, for example, David Harding wrote an interesting errata where he was saying, look, here's actually the 6 or 7 things that Satoshi got wrong, even in the in the white paper and things like this. And sometimes people don't know this. Like there are little specific bits and pieces that Satoshi got wrong, and so where does that leave us?
Well, so it's important to understand that this is a decentralized system. And if you know the Bitcoin Core developers, there are some that are really libertarian. There are people that are like socialists. And every shade in between. There are lots and lots of people that have very, very different views. And that's okay. That's actually the point, right? You don't have some central controller that gets to decide, no, this is Bitcoin. That's what we fought in 2017 all about. It didn't belong to the businesses. It didn't belong to the self-proclaimed representatives of Bitcoin or Craig S. Wright or whoever. It belongs to the users. And we're all going to have very diverse opinions, and it's this radical idea that you need everybody's approval to go do anything. And that's a really powerful thing, because instead of the majority sort of tyrannizing the minority, you have everybody getting a say into this thing. You can't change my node. The node I run is mine, and you can't make me upgrade. And that's the big difference between a centralized and a decentralized system. And from a sort of like belief standpoint, that means that only what everyone agrees to can change. But this is also really great for money, because nothing really changes unless you get agreement from everybody, and you have a lot more certainty because there are very few things that everyone would agree on. So therefore, it makes it a lot more stable. It makes it a lot easier to plan, and this is the reality that we found out over the last 13 years of its existence.
So I guess the theme is around the morality, the good, the evil. What are some of the? I guess we've got a couple minutes left before we go to the audience for questions. What do you see as the most important aspects to preserve the goodness of Bitcoin, right?
The 21 million cap, for one.
I feel like to me, it's the spirit of humble building, right? The other layer ones, let them go, testnet, however you want to deal with it. You just stay focused on what you're doing, and then you can look back for the past 14 years, 13 years, and see that incrementally things come together. And that spirit will, as Dea said, the rabbit and the turtle, to be self-confident as the turtle and not feel the need to compete with a bunch of rabbits and watch their dead bodies float by in the long run.
Neutral tech or not, I think hyper Bitcoinization, like imagine in some years everyone uses Bitcoin, like people will find a way to corrupt it. People will find a way to use, even if it's like very good tech at its core, will find ways to do evil stuff with that. I do believe the only place you can really pursue to maintain goodness is in your heart, like ownership, take responsibility for what you're doing, then everything will follow. If you lose track of that and focus on your on Bitcoin or some ideology, then you lose. That's what I think on this.
All right. Well, let's. I think it's been an interesting panel with lots of agreement and disagreement, and a range of views about the morality or let's say, the neutrality of Bitcoin. Let's go to the audience for a couple questions. So hands up, guys, if you have any questions. We've got one there.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on. Go.
No, I can't. Do you, in this era, in this century, do you think that it's hard to earn money? I'm stand between good as like angel and bad as evil. So I don't know what to battle about, and yes. Sorry. I just think that it's hard to invest money to Bitcoin, and yeah.
Sorry, I'm not clear. Could you? I'm not clear what the question is. Are you asking? Do you mind rephrasing the question?
It's very risky to invest money to Bitcoin. That's in my opinion.
So you're saying you believe it's risky to hold Bitcoin or to save with Bitcoin?
It's good if in 2024 it's good, but it's this year 2023 is evil, I think.
Like volatility. There's this.
Is there a question?
Hang on. I think the concern is
Is that
around.
just a statement or opinion?
Number go down, 2023.
So I had a Vietnamese friend tell me just a quick anecdote on this concern, which I think is around the volatility. He said, hey, in Vietnam, stocks go up in steps and down in elevators. With Bitcoin, it goes up in elevators and out the window when it goes down. And so there's volatility. It's a concern.
I don't know. That seems kind of. I don't know what that has to do with good or evil. It's I guess good or evil from a standpoint of like your portfolio or something like that. And
I just wanted to tell the story, Jimmy. That's all.
No. But I'm just pointing out that if you have sort of like money as your ultimate arbiter, which it does happen in a fiat economy, like whatever makes you money is awesome, and whatever doesn't is doesn't, and that's a very sort of like almost like a monetary Nietzschean mindset or something like that. I reject that as like a way to measure good or evil is by how well your portfolio is doing.
Yeah, it's important probably to note gambling is a bad, evil habit, whether you win or lose. So if you're in Bitcoin for the numbers going up, it's probably a very bad mindset.
Hi guys, thank you very much for all the different thoughtful perspectives that you put a lot of effort into putting here. So one thing I wanted to ask is, if you take the perspective that hyper-Bitcoinization, you know what I'm saying, hyper-Bitcoinization is going to happen, that it's inevitable, but also the perspective that it's going to be highly disruptive, irrespective of which country someone's in, and that you also take the perspective of being at least knowledgeable or somewhat prepared for it is going to be better for you than not. So is there a case where we actually should be even much more, it's probably something more like a Jimmy perspective, of being even much more aggressive and almost toxic than we are? Obviously not to the point of being obnoxious, but at least being, and saying, look, this is why I'm being obnoxious, is because you're clouding the message from people that at least need to hear it that otherwise wouldn't. They won't have time to come to me later to be like, I'm open-minded about this thing. My house burned down and there's like riots in the streets. I'm ready to hear about this thing while I have no fiat currency in my bank account, something like that.
We're definitely not being toxic enough.
No, the stakes couldn't be higher in terms of what the potential of this is for the long run, compared to, the difference between the systems we are proposing here. So I would say absolutely not. We should really do whatever it takes to preserve those good principles that the system has. We lose those principles, it's over. Then we could just as well go do just the fiat system, right? Then there's nothing to it there anymore. It's the principles, that's it. And we have to do what we need to do to preserve them. And if that means going way out there and speaking out, and that's probably what it takes.
I also want to say that as much as people saw clearly that in some things Jimmy and I have disagreement, I agree so much with what he said that the decentralization of Bitcoin means that it can hold so many different perspectives. So while I might say, no, we shouldn't be more, it'll all just happen naturally, I think it's quite possible that I'm wrong, moral relativism, and that Jimmy's toxicity is more useful than what I'm doing. But it doesn't make me want to do it.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I got this way through bitter experience, I gotta tell you, because I was a lot nicer when I started, right? 2017, you could go read my posts from 2017. They're still all up on Medium. And I would try to be very moderate and not be so toxic or offensive or whatever. Thing is, that never works. You don't nice people into an argument. They need to see the truth of what you're saying. And sometimes being obnoxious, being toxic, it gets people to think, because most people in the fiat world don't sort of behave that way, especially on something that they're passionate about. They like to sort of be seen as the moderate, the person that's a good political player, so they can walk up the status ladder eventually to CEO or something like that. And this, for a lot of people, ends up being signal because you're being toxic, right? Like, in a sense, they're like, why are these people so toxic? What is it about their conviction that I'm not getting? And it is kind of rare. And for me, that works way better. And believe me, I've had a lot of people come up to me, including the CEO of Swan, right? Like Corey, he was a shitcoiner when I met him. And I just told him straight up, hey, you know what? Like, this is what I think of all of these shitcoins. And here's what I think is the right thing. It's Bitcoin. And once you understand that, let me know. Let's talk again. We talked a couple of years later. He's like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And it took me a while, and I started studying it because of what we talked about. It works sometimes. But I agree that we need different approaches, and my style is probably not for everybody.
So what I would say, since this is good and evil, it's a great sort of, for me, ending thing, is that the reason I don't want to be toxic is for the purity of my own soul. I would rather stay like this and fail than become toxic. And I'm not claiming that this is right at all. I want you to know I'm judgmental, at least in my own mind. And in terms of good and evil, coming back to be careful when you fight with demons lest you become one. And echoing some of the things Andrew has said about the core being the purity of people's hearts. And I understand that it's all highfalutin, blah, 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 but I genuinely believe this, and I've seen the results of it in what reality has handed back to me karmically.
Corey still credits Jimmy for orange pilling him, so credit where credit is due. Just go out and orange pill some of your friends. That's the mission. Go do it in whatever way makes sense, in whatever way works.
Yeah, I'm not jumping in because I want to wrap it up. I quite like where this is going. So a question to Jimmy. So you mentioned that we might want to be more toxic. Walk us through, because I'm a straight shooter and I like it. And so walk us through what a roadmap to toxicity for hyper-Bitcoinization looks like if you were the man at the top and dictating, or just providing a doctrine to follow by. What would that look like?
Well, I can't do that because this is not a centralized thing or anything. I can just tell you my story, right? And this happens when you're in sort of like a fiat system, is that you're very careful about what you say to people. Because if you offend the wrong person at like a giant corporation X, then you're going to not get the promotion, you're not going to get on the right committees, and you're not going to get on the right projects, and you're not going to progress. And we've been trained this way all of our lives. You have 12 years of school where if you don't spit back exactly what the teacher says, then you will get punished, right? You get punished for sort of independent thinking or thinking through things on first principles or disagreeing with people. And for me, what really flipped the switch was getting out of my fiat job. The last fiat job I had was in 2017 when I quit Paxos. Paxos is, of course, like one of the Bitcoin or blockchain companies that exist. And for 2 years, I tried to make blockchain, not Bitcoin, work. By the way, it didn't. But after that and going off on my own, I realized that I had held a lot of beliefs purely to preserve my job. And this is sort of like rent-seeking fiat behavior that sort of seeps into everybody as you have jobs and sort of corporations that are your sponsors. So getting out from under that lets you be a lot more genuine. And when you're genuine, you can't help but be toxic in some ways because your opinions will offend people. But you have to be okay with that because, in a sense, you're afraid to offend other people in sort of any corporate setting because it has real monetary consequences to your future job prospects. You offend the wrong person, you are definitely not making director or VP or C-suite person. You have to sort of like play the right political game and so on. But Bitcoin is not like that, and I think real entrepreneurship is not like that. You have conviction about the things that you really believe. And when people see that, they see something different. And in a sense, that's when I really found my voice. So what we call toxicity or conviction or obnoxiousness is not really that, at least for me. It's just being genuine. It's saying what you believe. All the stuff that you're afraid to say because you think it might offend people, I got rid of that filter. And that's really all it is. I know what I believe, and I am not afraid to tell you what I believe. And for some people, that comes off as refreshing. For people that disagree with me, that comes off as toxic. And I'm okay with that. And in a sense, you're going to get more signal out of me for that reason, rather than the typical fiat person. So I would encourage all of you to go into business for yourself, to try entrepreneurship, to do some of this stuff that's going to get you out of that fiat mentality of not offending everyone. And I know this is especially difficult if you're Asian, right? I come from that culture, I understand, right? There's a hierarchy, and if you offend the hierarchy, they're going to really get mad at you, and there's like propriety and filial piety and all this other stuff and Confucianism. It is very, very difficult for an Asian. I know, I'm Asian, right? But I wear this hat for a reason. It's sort of breaking out of that and going to the frontier and not being afraid of stuff. Because it does take a lot of moral courage to stand by your convictions and defend it. This is my property. And this is the mentality that we have in this community. Not your keys, not your coins. Not your beliefs. They are not your beliefs if you're not willing to defend them. So defend your keys, defend your beliefs.
I think that's a great spot to finish up. Do you want to?
We can wrap it up.
Yeah.